Chapter 19. The patient could now make quite rapid la-la-la-la noises when asked. Her voice was growing stronger, and her fine motor skills were improving. Her hearing was 95 out of 100. Eye tests showed she was still having difficulty reading letters on the chart. This does raise concerns that her accident may have resulted in some loss of visual ability. Ryan. On Tuesday, I told my form teacher I was going to be away for part of tomorrow morning because there was a family group conference I had to go to. I must have sounded like a lawyer. Or a crim. When I got home, Mum said the Children, Youth and Family Service had rung to confirm things. Some woman called Denise. She said it would be us and Greg and the Gowers, Mel and Brittany, and the Chinese guy. His name was Han Zemin. Mum had written it down. Tara worked at his takeaways place. She'd been there just before it happened. I had no idea why he wanted to come. Greg didn't say anything about it at TKD. He got me to take the juniors again. I used to hate that. I wanted to be slamming away at things with the other seniors, but I didn't mind now. Tara. Our team was in the Summer League netball. I was remembering heaps of things now, and our coach was a teacher. A maths teacher called... Shit, how annoying. Hey, I had an assignment to do for her. Wonder if I managed to slither out of it. I mucked the team up. They came here to tell me one time. No, it was a photo. And I didn't muck them up. It was that bloody driver. I wonder if the guy who helped me knows him. Ryan. I went to school for the first 2 lessons on Wednesday. Ash said, "Good luck." And for a moment, I wish I'd asked him to come. Vince was out in the courtyard trying to chat up some new chick. John and Mum picked me up, and we drove downtown to the Citizens Advice Bureau where the conference was being held. Vince should be here, I thought again, but he wouldn't be. I'd given up hoping he would. It should have made me feel down. Instead, I felt as if something that had been dragging at me had suddenly fallen away. I'd had this stupid worry in case they'd stuck a policeman outside the door or something. So when I got out of the car and saw a guy in a security guard uniform waiting on the steps, I thought, oh no. Then I saw it was Greg. I knew that was his job, but I was just so used to him being in his TKD gear. The Chinese guy, Zemin, was arriving too. He wore a tie and a blue jacket. He came over and shook hands with Mum and John and Greg. "I'm not a rival," he said. Tara's parents were next, looking tired. Greg introduced himself to them, and I realised I should have done it. The youth aid cop from last week arrived, in an ordinary car. Phew. I heard footsteps behind me, and there were Mel and Brittany. Mel with her big eyes, Brittany with her big mouth. Mum looked like she was waiting for me to introduce them. No way. I remembered how in the history of World War II we'd read about the Battle of Britain. Now I was facing the Battle of Brittany. A tall woman with red hair swept into the car park, hurried over to us and said, "Hello, I'm Denise Metcalf. Sorry I'm late. My 5-year-old's got measles." She waved hello to the woman in the Citizens Advice Bureau office and led us through into a room with a circle of chairs. "It's really good of you all to be here." She smiled at me like I was doing her some favour. "I hope you'll all find this a worthwhile conference." She told us what would happen. The family of the victim, my back crawled again, were welcome to say anything they liked, how they felt about what had happened, what it had done to them, what should happen now. Any friends of the victim? Denise nodded to Zemin, who was sitting straight in his chair, polished black shoes together, could speak also. Then the family and friends of the offender, another word I had to face, were welcome to speak as well, a nod this time to Greg. After that, the offender and his family could discuss among themselves what they thought should be done and see if the victim's family agreed. I listened and hoped I wouldn't screw it up. Tara's mother and father didn't take long. They said their main feeling was relief that Tara was starting to recover, and worry while they waited to see how much better she'd get. They wished she could have been here, and they wanted me to remember what a huge chunk had been taken out of her life. They didn't feel any anger now. They knew I was sorry. Mr. Gower suddenly looked at me then and went, "I was angry, son. More angry than I knew I could be." Mrs. G squeezed his hand. They just wanted me to be aware that the effects on Tara could go on forever, and to try and make sure I never caused anything like it again. Next came Mel and Brittany. Mel just said, "We want Tara to get better. That's all that matters." It was short and sensible. Somehow, though, I'd expected a bit more. Then Brittany. I'd no idea what she'd say, but I wasn't going to let her think she was getting at me. She started by saying that Mel was right. Then she looked at me. "You told us you were sorry. I don't know if you are. Maybe you're just sorry for yourself." I twitched at that, but I made myself sit still. "Anyway, you make sure you do everything you can to help Tara. Then I might start to believe you. And you make sure you never hurt anyone else like you hurt my best friend." Her voice went wobbly on the last words. Oh, shit, I thought. Don't start howling. She shut up then, and Mel passed her a tissue. The SIFS woman, Denise, had a big box of them. I guess tissues get used a lot at family group conferences. Denise waited a second, looked at the Chinese guy, and asked, "Mr. Hahn, would you like to say something?" He spoke slowly, quietly. You could tell he was thinking out each word. He gazed at me, and I made myself look back. "Tara is a valued girl, valued by all. We lose her help, but this is not important. She is important. Everyone must work to help her be better. You are good for doing this." He paused, dipped his head slightly at me, and said, "The real man is one who says sorry." It sounded funny. It wasn't. We were all so quiet you could hear someone tapping on a computer down the hall. Denise said, "Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Now, Mrs. O'Carroll, John, would you like to comment?" Mum said I was a really good kid. I'd never been in trouble before. The youth aid cop nodded. She knew how sorry I was, and that I wanted to help Tara any way I could. "Stick that up your nose, Brittany." She stopped for a moment, then said, "I just want to thank Richard and Sally for their forgiveness. If anything like this ever happened to my child, I hope I could be as brave and kind as they've been." She choked up then. John put an arm around her. Mrs. G, who was sitting on her other side, looked like she might cry too. John said he was glad to be my stepfather. He mentioned how I'd paid the traffic infringement fine out of my own money, and I could tell the cop and the cis woman were pleased with that. Then Greg. He spoke quietly and carefully too. "Ryan's mum is right. He's a good kid. I believe he'll grow into a good man. At Taekwondo, he's thoughtful and considerate. He helps people. I know he'll face up to anything he has to do." Again, there was silence at the end. I already knew what I wanted to say. "I'm really sorry. I'd do anything if this had never happened. It was my fault, and I'll do anything else that helps Tara get better again." I looked straight at Brittany while I said this, and she stared back. "And I appreciate how you've all treated me." Denise waited for a moment, then thanked us again. "Mrs. O'Carroll," she said, "there's an office where you and John and Ryan and Greg?" She looked at my TKD instructor, who nodded his head. "You three can go and talk over what you think should happen next. In the meantime, I'm sure we can find some coffee or tea for everyone." In the office, I dropped into a chair. I felt like I'd been through one of Greg's training sessions. Mum hugged me and John. "You were wonderful, both of you." We talked easily, gently. We'd already decided some things. I'd offered to do a defensive driving course. I'd give up my license for as long as the gals wanted me to. I'd write a letter to them and Tara, saying how sorry I was. I'd keep helping the juniors at TKD. After a bit, we went quiet. Something was stirring in my mind. "Be good if there's anything else you can do for Tara herself," Mum said. Then I knew. I told them. John nodded. "Good, mate." Mum hugged me again. So we went back into the other room where the gal was stood with Denise and Mel and Brittany, and Greg was talking to Zeman. Everyone listened as we spoke. Brittany gave a sniff, but said nothing. Mr. and Mrs. Gower looked at each other, murmured for a minute, then nodded. Yes, if Watson House agreed, I'd work with Tara on her physio and her recovery exercises as much as I could. At the end of the 7th week, the patient's face still sometimes looked blank and expressionless. However, she could close her eyes when asked, and her facial movements were well controlled. The left side of her body remained weak. It was decided that on Friday the patient would be transferred to Watson House, where Ryan O'Carroll may assist with her rehabilitation. Tara. I remembered 2 more names. The coach of our summer league team was Miss Gilchrist. I knew I had the name somewhere. I sort of posted a message off to my brain to find it, and after a long while, the answer came back. And I worked in the takeaways for Jimmy. How could I have forgotten Jimmy? And Dolly. That's 3 names. Awesome. It was so funny the way I remembered Jimmy. The meals were being brought through the ward on the trolley. I smelt fish, and suddenly I knew. Jimmy's been here, to the hospital. I remembered that too. I didn't want to eat the fish. My stomach feels like it's shrunk. It hurts when I try to swallow much. I can handle drinks and stuff like milkshakes, but there was this really scary time yesterday, I'm not sure, when they tried me on some soup with bits of vegetable in it. Mum was feeding it to me. I can't get my hands to hold things properly yet. I managed the first couple of spoonfuls, but then a piece of potato or something half stuck, and I choked and coughed till it went down. Suddenly I knew I couldn't swallow any more. Mum was poking the next spoonful at me, and I started trying to pull my head away and got panicky because I couldn't. The soup spilled down my t-shirt, and I was yelling at Mum and the nurse to stop. Trying to yell anyway. I could hear these rasping noises coming out of my mouth. Shit, shit, shit. Just when I thought I was doing really well. Things quietened down, and Mum sat talking to me. I wouldn't listen for a bit. I was still annoyed with her about the soup. Then I started paying attention, and I understood most of it. Watson House isn't people. It's a place they're moving me to for physio and stuff. Why do I have to go somewhere else? I like the hospital. Then I heard Mum say a 4th name. Ryan. The guy who came to see me. The guy who helped. But Mum was saying that he's from Watson House or something, and he's going to help me while I'm there. But I thought he was... I don't know. I must have got it all wrong. Just when I think I remember something, it's gone again. I wish the doctors or someone would talk to me about it. I wish somebody would tell me what I look like. The times I think about that, I get too scared to ask.